Well, we'll let those folks go. And the honourable member for Etobicoke-Mactaquac.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I was saying previously, it is so important that we get this right as it relates to Bill C-49. The critical importance of natural resource development and the critical importance of getting the renewable sector right and making sure that we expand the economic opportunities for the region of Atlantic Canada is absolutely vitally important to not only the citizens of Atlantic Canada, but the nation as a whole. Our country has been
Interrupt the honourable member just for a second, just so I can remind everyone. Order. We have debate going on, and I'm hearing some rumblings and just people talking. If they have discussions that they want to take place, if they don't mind to take them to the outside, either in the lobby or they've got beautiful new meeting rooms on the other side in the antechamber. So I'll just leave it to them to do that so that we can hear what the honourable member has to say. The honourable member for Etobicoke-Mactaquac, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And one of the things when you're considering resource development and we're considering this bill, I think obviously all Canadians want us to strike the right balance. They want us to balance out, obviously, the responsibility to be good stewards of the environment, to make sure we care for the planet, for not only our generation but future generations. And that is of utmost priorities for all Canadians, as well as those who live in my region in particular, including New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland and Labrador. We want to hand on to future generation a planet that is cleaner and greener, and obviously want to develop our resources in a responsible fashion. We also, as a region, and the people from the area that I represent, and I believe it's true throughout Atlantic Canada, want to make sure that they have an economically viable future for them and their families in their local communities and throughout Atlantic Canada, so that not only do we reap the benefits of that hard work and that development, but future generations do. So striking that balance is of utmost importance. And what I find with this particular bill that is concerning is that it puts way too much power in the hands of too few. And it could be detrimental to the development of vital resources to our nation's national energy, as well as our nation's food security, our nation's future as a secure country in which to invest and do business. If we don't get it right, and if we allow this type of control in the hands of very few, the consequences could be devastating for economic development in Atlantic Canada and across Canada as a whole. So we've raised very legitimate concerns. We want this government to look at carefully and hopefully amend this bill and correct this bill so that development can happen that is responsible and obviously cares for our environment, which we all want to make sure is done, but at the same time doesn't prohibit those who want to build Canada's economic future and make sure we take advantage of the tremendous resources that we have across the country from coast to coast to coast, including Atlantic Canada, that has unbelievable potential to develop its resource sector. This is a time not to hamper investment. This is a time to look at ways to enhance investment into our region. Canada and Atlantic Canada wants to contribute to our future economically as a country in a way like never before. Let me pause just here, just for a moment, Mr. Speaker, to recognize something that oftentimes gets lost. And I think we talk about things in terms, and governments bring in legislation and they pass things based on ideology and thoughts and philosophy, no matter how well intended. But in all of this, it is no secret that national unity is at stake. We have for too long of late, under this particular government and this particular Prime Minister, pit one region against another and caused certain regions to feel alienated or left out, or perhaps taken for granted. In fact, in reality, we know that's the case. Well, I'd like to say on behalf of Atlantic Canadians, I love Canada, and I love every region of it. And we've been blessed in Atlantic Canada, directly and indirectly, because of the resource sector that is in the western part of Canada. So I'd like to just say, on behalf of those of us on the East Coast, thank you to our western provinces. Thank you to our friends out west that have allowed our resources to be developed, and the money and the proceeds and the revenue that's been generated from that extraction and from those resources to be distributed throughout the country to regions like mine and provinces like mine. We benefited from those transfer payments. And we would be remiss not to say thank you, Western Canada. Thank you to the resource developed regions of our country who've made it possible for revenues to be transferred to our provinces so that we can have good schools and we can have hospitals and we can build roads and we can develop. But just as much as I believe in that, I think it's so vitally important that we as Atlantic Canadians also have the opportunity to develop our own natural resources and prosper as a region and elevate the economy of our families. It's unfair to hold back the potential of a region like Atlantic Canada that has endless potential in this region and in this realm by putting in prohibitive measures and over-regulate a sector or put too much power in the hands of too few that could, at the whim of an in particular minister, shut down an entire sector of our economy. So we have big, big cautionary signals coming from this bill. And I challenge this House to look beyond the noise, look beyond the rhetoric, and see the facts. We hear a lot of noise about we're going to protect the planet, we're going to heal the oceans, we're going to reduce carbon, we're going to do all these things. That's the noise. But when you get beyond the noise and the chatter, the reality is, and the facts are, we rank 57 of the 63 nations. We haven't met our targets despite our virtue signals. We haven't met those objectives despite great soaring rhetoric. We talk about we're going to plant billions of trees with only a handful that are actually in the ground. I think it's time we look beyond the noise, and Canadians expect us to stop all the chatter and all the talk and all this great sounding rhetoric about this and get to the place of achieving actual attainable results that do good for our country and the world. And here's the reality. The reality is we're not measuring up on meeting these targets, but we're certainly punishing the very sectors that have led to Canada's prosperity to this point. That's the facts. The noise says, oh, well, we're meeting these targets and we're doing great. But the facts are we're ranking 57 of 63 nations. And facts are stubborn things. And they're proven when it comes to both the environment and the economy, this government is all noise and no results. Canadians want real results. And I believe we can have both responsible and good, wholesome environmental stewardship and economic prosperity and resource development that's responsible at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. In fact, Canadian energy is the best energy in the world, and we need to make no apologies for Canadian energy. We need to stand up for Canadian energy. It is the most responsibly extracted energy on the planet, and why are we displacing Canadian energy with those from countries that don't have near the environmental regulations that we have as a country? It makes no environmental sense, nor does it make energy sense. Nor does it make economic sense. It's important that we get the balance right. And this bill is not going to go a long ways in helping us get the balance right. We've got to correct this bill. There's so much noise that the facts are getting lost. But Canadians are perceptive. And they're getting beyond the persuasiveness of rhetoric. And they're saying, what is it that you're accomplishing to position Canada to prosper in the future? We talk about just transition. This government loves to talk about that. Just transition to what? No, it's not a just transition to move segments of our population from prosperity to poverty. That's not just. That's an unjust transition to poverty. We need a true, mobilized transition to economic empowerment accompanied by environmental responsibility. We can do that. And Canada has proven that it can do that and be a leader in that space. And I'm actually quite encouraged by some of the developments we see within our resource sector. We have some of the greatest clean technologies in the country. We have some of the most environmentally responsible resource projects in the world. We are a leader, and we got to stop taking a back seat and stop talking down our energy sector, stop talking down our resource sector, and stop putting impediments in the way of our development. What we need to do instead is start championing our energy sector, our resource sector, and our good environmental practices, and tell the story of the great results we're attaining as a country and as a natural resource industry in this country. Why is it we're talking down Canadian energy when we should be saying, we've got a good news story to tell? And yes, we're all for all the above. We want to transition in areas where it's possible. We're for wind, nuclear, solar, and yes, even tidal. You see, while they talk about transition, we're shutting down some of the moves towards renewable energies and projects that have incredible potential. Because of what? Cumbersome regulation and misplaced priorities. We had the sustainable energy project that was going to be going on with tidal energy in Nova Scotia. They pulled the plug on it. Why? It was so encumbered and hampered by over-regulation and cumbersome rules that it was no longer economically viable and made no sense to continue. So they stopped that. How is that good for the planet? Well, we're sitting on the cusp of innovation, and it was the only tidal project in North America. We pull the plug on it as a country and then talk about how, oh, we're for saving the planet and we're for transition to new green economy. And yet, we pulled the plug on those viable projects. There's another one, a mill in Nova Scotia was going to use its waste for biodegradable goods and producing those. We pulled the plug on that. Why? Because it'd take 20 years to get the approvals they needed in order to proceed with the project. We're scaring away investments into our renewable energy sector and our resource sector, and we're not investing in the areas that could do the most impact and have the biggest and most resounding results for our country economically and environmentally. We have a great news story to tell. Another concern that we have with Bill C-49 is as it relates to our Indigenous partners and friends. It talks about that the regulators would be able and be empowered to talk with our Indigenous leaders. But it never mentions once the obligation and the absolute primary importance of the Crown to deal directly with our Indigenous friends to get these projects off the ground. Surely history has taught us a lesson to engage with our Indigenous friends at the beginning of the process, at the beginning of these projects, and make sure they're welcome and equal partners at the table with us as we enter into these areas of innovation and production. And we can get great things done for the country, because as you hear from Indigenous leaders across the country, they're wanting to partner with us on these. They want to be at the table with all of these types of projects, and they want to prosper economically and do good for the environment as well. Let's welcome them at the front end and make sure a bill like this includes them meaningfully and instructs the Crown to deal with them directly, rather than, oh, the regulators will. Let's not make this a secondary priority. Let's make it one of the primary priorities. So, Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker, I conclude my remarks by simply saying that we have an opportunity to position Canada to be the most energy secure and one of the most economic powerhouses in the world, while at the same time being one of the most environmentally responsible jurisdictions on the planet. It's time we get it right. Let's stop talking down Canadian resource development and stop throwing up roadblocks to resource development for all regions of our country, including Atlantic Canada, and let's prioritize them and get them at the table. We have a great opportunity. Let's get it right. Let's get the balance right. Let's fix this bill, and if we fix the bill, then we'll do good for everyone. But if we don't fix the bill, we got no choice but to stand against it so that our country can move forward. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Kings Heads.